Hello, inspiration from Amanzimtoti, South Africa. My name is Wesley Pulvenis, and together with my wife, Corrine, we get to lead a Church of the Nations community called Cedar Hill Church right here in Amanzimtoti. We too are in the throes of a nationwide lockdown as we deal with the challenges of this COVID-19 pandemic. I want to take a moment and point you towards the love of Christ. I want to read to you from the Passion Translation. I want to read to you a scripture in John 13 and verse 1. This is what it says. Jesus knew that the night before the Passover would be his last night on the earth, before leaving this world to return to the Father's side. All throughout his time with his disciples, Jesus had demonstrated a deep and tender love for them. And now he longed to show them the full measure of his love. I'm fully convinced that the greatest and most profound experience we could ever have is to encounter and live in the love of Christ. It's what he lived to demonstrate and longed to show. Without it, we'll miss the point of the gospel, and Jesus knew that. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave." That's the point of the gospel. He loved, so he gave. Jesus was compelled by love for his friends. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. That's what John 15:13 tells us. And that's exactly what he did. It's in going to the cross that he showed us the full measure of his love. If this is true, and it is, then to sit and meditate on the love of Christ could just be the most important thing you do. I think the Apostle Paul believed the same thing. In fact, he was convinced of this. You see, Paul taught that in order for us to be filled with the fullness of God, we each had to come into a personal revelation of the love of Christ. Paul prayed for the church that they would discover and experience the great magnitude of the astonishing love of Christ in all its dimensions. As we read through the writings of Paul, we come to see and understand his deep and wide and high view of the love of Christ. It seems to me that his entire life was summed up in the single pursuit of what it meant to be loved by Jesus, what it meant to rely on and trust in being totally, absolutely loved by Jesus. You don't believe me? Well, listen to Paul. These are his words out of Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. "I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." You see, for Paul, all that he had, all that he knew, all that he hoped for, all that he longed for, all that he was sure of was because he was convinced that Jesus loved him and gave his life for him. Are you? Are you convinced in the same way? I want to close by sharing a moment in my life that forever changed me and allowed me to see the love of God in a new way. I had recently come back to Christ. I had been backslidden and I'd come back to Christ. And I heard a young lady named Lauren Kendrick preach a message on the love of Christ in a school hall on a Sunday night. And as she ended, she told how Mother Teresa would spend her days whispering a prayer. She'd go about her daily duties softly praying this: "Jesus, in my heart, I believe in your precious love for me. Jesus, in my heart, I believe in your precious love for me." That night, I began praying that prayer and God began opening my eyes. Inspiration, my prayer for you at this time is that you would meditate on the love of Christ and believe in his precious love for you. I want to just extend my love. Much love to you. Stay blessed, family.